At no point during this presentation did the modeler being featured or the person helping record the video claim to be working for Paramount Pictures, Fox Studios, or any private independent studio. We're all just modelers enjoying the hobby, sharing what we've created and nothing more. If something is too hard to watch, too hard to see, or not what you expected, you can either find something else, squint, lower your expectations, or go pound sand. With all that said, you've been warned. The footage that you're about to see has creative content, inspirational visuals, and if you're lucky, you'll find a tip that is useful to you. Welcome to their content-packed 3 layouts tour with part 1 with Greg Smith of the Great Northern in the late 1960s, Paul Bukowski in the central Minnesota and western, as well as Graham Stockfeld checking out the Soo Line from Australia. Enjoy part 3.
For 3 layout tour, for 3 layout tour.
G'day everybody. I'll be starting very shortly, just walking outside. The weather turned a bit nasty, so I had the camera set out here to start with, but the wind was getting a bit too strong. I'll just give you a word about myself and the club in general to start with. Obviously I'm Graham. Our group has been going for around 35 years now, maybe a bit longer. It started in the very early 80s. It was a group of train drivers and firemen, as we were called, who wanted to run prototypically and with good quality rolling stock. And back then, to get good quality rolling stock, you had to build it all yourself, basically. And we wanted to have some private sessions on a club layout that I was a member of. Anyway, so we formed a group. We used to run American 1 month and Australian the next on private operating sessions at the Australian Model Railway Association club layout. Anyway, we did that for quite a few years. We still do, but we don't run Australian anymore, we just run American. I'm not sure when we formalised the club, but at some stage we decided to give it a name, which was NARC, the North American Model Railroad Collective, because we had Canadian modelers, American modelers, and also one guy who was keen to do a bit of Mexican, but he never got there, never did it. But we had that planned. Anyway, so over the years, we decided we'd build an exhibition layout, and that's what we're going to see today. But I'll show you my shed so you can see the front of it there. I'll switch the camera around. Okay, so this is the shed. It was built specifically for a model railway that's never been built, but I have started in the last couple of weeks. It is about 16 metres by 5.5 metres. I don't know what that is in feet. It's, I think, 50 foot long, 25 foot wide roughly, but it's in my back garden, and yeah, it will do the job once I get rid of this layout that we've got in there now that we're going to see today. There's a lot of junk in there, so it's a workspace rather than a nice clean layout room at the moment. So there's rubbish everywhere. So this layout, I measured it in feet for our non-metric friends. It's about 35 foot long and about 12 feet wide. But that's only roughly. It's quite hard to measure because it's an unusual shape. Oops. So at the rear of the layout, well, to start with, it's an exhibition layout. It's designed to be portable and taken to shows. So it's unlike the other layouts that we've been watching. There are 3 yards here at the back. The train currently is pulling into the outer yard, which is for the got to remember, the eastbound trains, I think. And there's the inner yard, which is for the westbound trains, and the centre yard, which can have trains operating in both directions, and that services the lower level of the layout. So the layout is basically divided into 4 sections. There's the inner main, outer main, Capital City Steel, and Springfield Terminal, the 3 sections. I'm just looking at the questions. Modular concept, Tom? Well, I think of modulars as being to a standard, so that like the Fremo layouts, and they anybody can hook anything together. This is a sectional layout, I'd say. So yes, it all comes apart, but yeah, it'll never connect up to a different layout. I see Rick's replied yes, and yeah, Rick is right that it comes apart into what we'd call modules, but yeah, it's not like not like Fremo. So Rick is, if you can answer some questions, he's one of our members, but he's currently in Canada. He's moved back after many years in Australia. We've got Barry here today, who is over there giving us a wave. Robert and Tim are online, they're members too, so they may answer some questions. We'll follow a train around the front. So these trains have been running around quite successfully for a couple of hours without derailing. So hopefully they'll keep it up, but yeah, as soon as somebody starts watching, that's when it goes wrong. So this is the front of the layout. So as you can see, the main lines are up high, and that's to keep trains running, because as it's an exhibition layout, when I was a kid working on layouts, I was always yelled at by my uncle, train up the front. And yeah, it was always hammered in that you had to have action all the time on the layout to keep the customers happy. So yes, we've got 2 main lines running up the top, and they're not interfered with at all by the lower part of the layout, which is Springfield and Capital City Steel. So this area here is the Springfield Milling District. Being a Soo Line modeller, and the M&S modeller, you've got to love grain and milling. This area here is the township of Springfield, I guess you'd say, and the depot, that's Springfield Depot. I'll slowly come up the other end where Barry's going to start running a train for us. You can see in the background the steel mill, that's Capital City Steel. And this is Shelbyville. Barry's bringing a train out of Ogdenville. Now, you can see at the other end I've got the backdrop up. I managed to get a couple of sections up. Normally this would have a backdrop right across the back, and you would only be able to see under the bridge the train just appearing from behind. So we've got some loading for Shelbyville, the paper for Robert's printing, and the couple of little 2-bay hoppers picking up a waste product, I'd say, maybe fly ash from the power station. The exhibitions, we're supposed to be at an exhibition this weekend, but it was cancelled. We had a local exhibition in Eltham or Diamond Valley this weekend, and it got cancelled a couple of weeks ago. The next exhibition we were on was going to be in Sydney. I see Rob Barker's online, and he's in Sydney. He was going to come and operate on the layout in Sydney. Yes, but all our exhibitions have been cancelled now. And after the Sydney exhibition, I was planning to go to the States to head to the NMRA convention. That's just been cancelled. I imagine that the RPM meet will be cancelled shortly after. And so the gate just opened magically. We can only fit the very low 2-bay hoppers in this siding. The unloading facility, I don't think, was actually designed for freight cars. I think it was designed for trucks. And I managed to squeeze the truck under, and we can just get these low 2-bay hoppers in there. But that's all you need. These two buildings in this area are both Walther's kits, and they're unpainted. They've just been weathered with chalks. I was a bit dubious about doing it, but we were leading up to a show. We didn't have time to paint, so we just attacked them with chalks, and of course the couplings aren't working for us today. And they came up a treat. I was quite surprised. We've got 3 industries here: the Roberts Printing, the power station, and this old abandoned main line that you can see there that used to go to Brockway. And yes, all the names are out of The Simpsons. The track that heads off down near Barry off the edge of the layout, that used to go to, I've got to remember now, North Haverbrook. Another Simpsons reference. This layout, it was built originally probably between 15 and 20 years ago. It then spent 10 years pulled down, and it sat half at my place, the fiddle yard, and basically the fiddle yard, or the staging yard, as you Americans call them, sat here in my shed with stuff piled all over it, and the rest of the layout sat at Tim's place, about 5 minutes from here. And it was just in a garage underneath some plastic tarps. My daughter had her 21st, and I had to clean my shed out. So that was 2 years ago. This shed was chock-a-block full of junk. Anyway, we cleaned it out and set it up for the 21st. And then after the 21st, we got all the parts of the layout together. and I kind of hoped that it was going to be a complete disaster, and that 10 years of sitting around in varying conditions would have meant that the layout was not fit for purpose anymore. Unfortunately, when we put it back together, or fortunately, the layout had stood up remarkably well, and we've been working on it steadily ever since. We've got... Have we done 2 shows, Barry? Or 1 show? Just one show. We've done 1 show, and the layout went pretty well, but we discovered quite a few faults in the layout, so they've been repaired, and it's running and running compared to how it used to run remarkably well. We had a very traumatic exhibition probably a bit over 10 years ago where we were in a basketball court. It was the first time that the layout had been in a major exhibition, and the temp was about 40 degrees Celsius, so about 100 degrees. The basketball court was unair conditioned, and the layout did not perform well. It was extremely stressful. So yeah, nobody was too upset to set the layout aside for a decade, but now, yeah, it seems to be working quite well. So while Barry continues switching there, I'll just come down here and talk about the steel mill a little bit. So when the layout was originally built, the Walters steel mill was the latest and greatest product on the market. So we jumped in and thought that was a good theme for the layout. But we're slowly getting there. Barry has become a steel mill guru for us. He's very involved in all the online groups and keeping up with the latest. Our design of the steel mill complex is quite inaccurate, one would have to say, but we've managed to move trains around and have a bit of fun with it. So the locomotives here are Barry's, the Union Railroad. With the routing we have is that the slag cars, which I better get my pointer that I made. Sorry, I'll just whiz up here. Sorry, probably everybody's been getting seasick from the rapid camera movement. So the slag cars, which are loaded in this road, they when they're loaded, we whack a caboose on the back. Either this or one of the Bessemer one, and they head out on the main line around towards Ogdenville. Thank you, Barry. We don't operate it enough with using the names. So they leave the steel mill complex and disappear around to the back of the layout. And we can do a cut of 8 cars at any time that runs nicely. The hot metal cars that are loaded in here in these 2 roads. Oops. They run over to the electric furnace at the back here, and which I think we now realise is not the right routing for them, but that's where they go. And from the electric furnace we get hot metal billets, which come out in the little buggies, these billets, and they head down to the rolling mill with the big Capital City Steel sign on it. The blast furnace is fueled by coke that comes from the coke oven there, so you can see a couple of coke cars hiding back there. They run up to the quencher here. Once they've been quenched, they're taken up to the high line behind the behind the steel mill and are unloaded back there. So Barry's switching is going on quite nicely. He's placed the vehicles in the industries, and he's bringing the rest of the train up along the street trackage. One of the things we all liked was street trackage, so that was something we decided a feature we wanted for the layout. I'm going to try and get in a position. Oops. Can't get the finger pan in the right direction, I'm sorry. Oh, there we go. Yeah. So, unfortunately, I managed to blow the headlight when I was putting the sound decoder in this unit. We've got all the sound turned off, but yeah. So there's no headlight on my dolly sister. I put wow decoders in there. I saw, yes, Greg, you did see a disco ball. That's left over from the 21st. We had a band in here, and a disco ball. It was a big party. So Barry's just arrived in Springfield. Yeah. Do you want to run some of the steel mill stuff? Unfortunately, I can't scroll back through the comments, but hopefully Rick or Robert are answering some of them. I did see one about what sort of climate control. Well, we're fortunate here. We live in a, what do they call it? I can't think of the name of the climate, but it's not too hot, not too cold. So temperate climate. That's it. Thank you, Barry. Yeah. So Barry's positioning the second for coke cars for loading. Not coke cars, slag cars for loading. And I think the hot metal may be going to move after that. Yeah. So when I built the shed, I put a lot of insulation in, good quality insulation, which came in handy because it was acoustic insulation, came in handy for the party because the band wasn't overly loud outside. It was quite loud inside. But yeah, the insulation works very well, so this area stays cool in the summertime most of the time and warm in the wintertime. I do have a reverse cycling air conditioner that we put in for the 21st in case it got overly hot, and it ran that night. It's probably run 2 or 3 other times when we've had work nights when it's been warm. And you get a few people in here, it gets hot, but most of the time it's quite comfortable. Somebody asked how I got interested in the Midwest of the States. It just happened. I was a British modeller. I modelled the London North Eastern Railway. You can't see much of what's going on behind there. One of the problems with the design of the layout, and the other is that it's very hard to reach back there. So it's a bit of an issue at times. But the steel mill will basically have 2 people operating there. But yeah, so I was a British modeller, and when I got involved with all these other drivers or engineers, they were all modelling the SP or the UP, the big railroads, and I'll just look over here while Barry touches the rolling stock and tries to overcome the stall. Still not playing ball with us. The lights are on, Barry. Yeah. Here we go. So Barry's going back to place the hot metal cars in the steel mill. So the railway road that I worked for here, the Victorian Railways, it was about the same size as the Soo Line. And back in the 80s, we were still running, well, a local equivalent of F units, and we had a lot of small locomotives, like mini jeeps, and the Soo Line just struck me. It was about the same size fleet. We had 300 odd locos, and so did the Soo. We had a lot of old power, a lot of EMD, or ours was all EMD. Cato and Athern, what's that, Rob? Yeah, so the Soo Line and the red and white paint scheme just struck me as something that I really liked. And so I got hooked on the Soo Line, and that led me to the MN&S, which I just find a fascinating railroad. So, yep, we all have our interests, and it always strikes me as funny that modelling in America seems to be so regional, whereas in Australia, when I was a kid, everybody modelled overseas railroads because there wasn't the rolling stock available for Australian models. So we've got a rake of rolling stock that's heading for the foundry for repairs. The foundry is right down the other end of the layout, so we'll just follow it down. How are we going for time, Barry?
It's about just before 1.
Just before 1, okay.
3 minutes.
I've practiced this many times and nothing's fallen off, and today it's falling off. Had all these moves staged. I shouldn't let the secrets out, but at least the 2 trains in the main line are running around all right. So you can see the effect with the backdrop here behind the buildings. That's the backdrop used to be the full height before the last show, but we practiced on operating the layout here and discovered that we really needed to lower the backdrop. The idea originally was that you wouldn't see anything out the back; it was all staged. So that's what, the view blocks in this area, so that you don't see the train coming from the staging onto the main layout. It just appears from behind these silos. One of our members whoops! I'm just thought I was getting the hang of the gimbal, but it plays out. He did our sign writing. Brett, it's very talented in that department. No, I wasn't sure whether Robin Hood flour was a real thing or not, but it turns out it is. And it's a Canadian company, but nice big sign to have on the building. He did the Capital City Steel sign as well on the rolling mill. One of our newer members, James, he's done all these billboards and signs that have gone up around the place, and he's added a lot of static grass and trees to the layout, which have really lifted it. So we get, obviously the raw grain comes into the silo here. That big brown blob in the background there, it was going to be covered in design. I'm trying to think of what the name of the people that make the modular brick segments, design preservation bits, but at the shows nobody has ever mentioned that it's just plywood that's painted brown. I think your eyes just fill in the detail. So there's a building back there, and the green building in the front foreground is scratch built, and it's based on a building in the Twin Cities, which I was going to look up which mill it was at. But when I was there 20 odd years ago, I watched some switching happening at a mill, and I liked what I saw. So I roughly copied the building from memory. It was the mill that was near where the bridge collapse happened, the freeway bridge over the Mississippi. Barry's arrived down at the foundry with the vehicles to go in there and get repaired. It's got this roadway that goes underneath, again disappearing off behind. It does another turn and goes underneath the bridge back there, but it's all designed as background clutter, basically. That unit's still running, Barry, is it? Yeah. I'll have a quick look under the layout to show you what's happening down there. The layout was designed to be lightweight. You can keep switching, Barry. Yeah. And portable. It's portable, but it's certainly not lightweight. So the frame was aluminium. Oh, where's my pointer? Or it still is aluminium. It's metal that's made for office partitions, and it's very easy to work with. You cut it and screw it together, and it's as solid as a rock. There's these corner brackets for the legs. The legs just slot in. They're just pine with adjustable feet on them. There's no bracing or anything. We built all this massive bracing to Pillsbury A Mill. That's probably right. Thank you, Jeff. There's two lengths of legs, long and short. The short ones are for the front and the long ones are for the back, and any leg can go anywhere. Obviously, as long as it's a short leg or a long leg location. What else is down here that's of interest? Not much, really. There's minimal cables run between the layout. These are our main track buses, which I wouldn't do like this again, but we did it. So they're all now twisted pairs, Originally they weren't twisted, and we had all sorts of issues. We still have issues with some power districts and things. I think we were getting cross-talk between the cables. All the switch wiring, etc., goes through these cables that feed into the control panels, and they bridge the gaps. So any wiring that's got to cross the gap apart from the power goes through these panels. The front of the layout is nearly all just tortoise point machines controlled normally. There's a junction here where you can go between the upper section and the lower section through the points there. Oops, I've got a gimbal. Through these points and down this track. We can run coal, etc., that goes to the steel mill down there, and trains of just general freight for the short line. Those points are, I have to remember where I was up to, those points are controlled by decoders, and they've got a Digitrax DS64 controlling those. I'll just head around the back to the oops, the gimbal's gone crazy. The staging. It's all controlled by either this panel or a similar one at the other end that control all the points at each end of the yards, or these panels, which aren't connected at the moment, that have what's the company's name now, Barry? Signatrack. Power Masters decoders, or their controllers, I guess. So these plug into the Digitrax LocoNet, and you can put them anywhere around the layout and control either yard from those. They work reasonably well. Positioning was an issue. We found we had them in the wrong spot for where the operators wanted to operate from, because as it's quite a big layout, it's hard to see both ends of the yard from any one spot. The legs. Well, this is the little staging yard we've got on the other side for the Springfield and short line. So that raised track at the back comes through the backdrop. It's through the backdrop here. Whoops. Through the backdrop here, and you can push a loaded coal train in there and unload it, and then magically it runs back around to the front. I'm getting the wind up from Barry around the front. The rest of the yard is just used to supply freight cars to the front of the layout. You'll see all these short little legs stacked up around here. We use those on the fiddle yard. When we're transporting it, we can sit those on each module, and the legs from below each module stacks on top of the next one, is what I'm trying to say. So it's quite an effective system. It just means we've got to carry around all these little tiny short legs, but it all stacks quite nicely. These three are permanently mounted on this section. So this bit sits on top of this bit and it all comes together quite nicely. Thomas, is it time to finish up? I didn't get any M&S logos out, I'm afraid, Bill, but I'll run down the line of hopper cars for you. So I've got all my rolling stock sitting on the layout at the moment. I started unpacking it to just to see what I had and to run some trains. And I ended up getting out way too much, and I discovered I've got way too many hopper cars. I ran a train the other day around the layout that was 101 hoppers, I think it turned out in the end, which was almost loco touching van, or caboose, I should say. It worked quite well, surprisingly, until I tried to take a video of it when it started playing up. I wanted to talk about the lighting rig that we've built. This did actually turn out to be lightweight. So you can see this pole running up here. It's just sitting there, held in place by a G or an F clamp down the bottom. There are four. Oops, I've got to get the gimbal to go in the right direction. There are four poles like that are held on with G clamp or F clamps. Sorry, I'm moving around to the front of the layout. The lights and those sections of aluminium. This is a black piece. I'll hold out there. 25 mil square, so inch square. We can get these. I don't know if you can get them in the States. Rick, I think, tried to get them in Canada and couldn't get them, but they're just, there's a whole selection of different pieces like this T section. So these T sections in the middle there, Barry can point up at that one. So that'll be a T section. At the back is a right angle section, and they hold the system together quite strongly. The lights themselves are in this U section, which is not designed to fit, but it's pretty close. It does the job, and the lights themselves are just two runs of LEDs, which we've turned off because when we tried to look at them the other day through the camera, they were way too bright. You couldn't see what was there, so we had to put some double-sided tape in and run the LEDs down, put some plugs between the different sections, and Bob's your uncle. It was Tim, who is online, designed it, and yeah, it was a really good lighting rig, very light, quite cheap, and it doesn't light the layout by itself, but it certainly supplies enough extra light. So we rely on the venue's lighting to light the layout overall, but this just highlights the thing. You could potentially run two strips of this U-shaped aluminium down to provide extra light, but that worked out quite well. The layout itself is built on sheets of ply that we got. One of my mates worked for Dow, and they used to get a lot of stuff shipped in crates made of this ply in sheets that were that size. And we got a lot of it. It was just, they just threw it out. So we got a lot of that. So the layout is that aluminium frame with a ply on top. My voice is going. The ply was put on in double layers because of the size of the sheets. It didn't help with the lightweight concept. In fact, it destroyed the lightweight concept, but it has proved to be very stable. And then on top of the ply is the blue foam, which again came from Dow, where my mate worked before they closed down in Australia. Somebody was talking about the BN caboose. It is a really cool caboose. It almost ended up a disaster. It was the first brass I'd painted, and I had been reading or being told about putting them in the oven to set the paint, which I did. It got quite warm in the oven, and yeah, there's one corner of it's a little bit saggy, but you just ran through a point there, Barry. That's what that's shorted out. So this industry here is burns oil. So I better show my pipe work that I have put in there. Oops, that was all put in the last couple of days for this layout tour. So it's completely inaccurate, but it looks the part. The depot here is scratch built. It's based on plans from the Soo Line archives. Oh, I can't think of what it's called. They're drawing books anyway. I think it's the #1 depot. Oops. Get around to the other side. It's got the little office section. I'm confusing the gimbal trying to get down low. Sorry. Greg, I've been buying so many little cars lately. It's costing me a fortune, but I do like them. There's at this end of the depot. I've lost my pointer. This track here is designed is where the locos get serviced. As it's a short line, they just use one little track. There's going to be a small compound here for all the spares and sand and oils, etc. So I was trying to get it built for today, but it didn't happen. So the contractor's turned up with the fence posts in his pickup. I'll just pull one of these out as I'm trying to replicate the fence for Lejeune Steel. It's going to be on my layout, which I'd noticed as a round fence post, but the top of it is a square section where the barbed wire sits. So I was bending these and grinding them to try and get that effect. I don't know, it's coming up on the camera very well, but I'm getting there. I'm not quite happy with it yet, but we'll make it work. Yeah, so I'm not quite sure. I think it's probably it. Has anybody Got any questions that haven't been answered? I'll sit and look at the questions coming through on the feed. Oh, come up for the moving loco, but it's not moving.
We've got an issue.
Oh, we got an issue. We haven't got smoke coming out again, have we?
No, I don't think so.
Well, the main line's still running. So if there's no more questions, I don't see anything. It's thank you, Tom. It is turning into quite a nice layout. Like I said to somebody the other day, there's times I would have burnt it happily, but at the moment, yeah, I'm torn. I really want to start building my layout. I have built the very first section, but I need this shed to put it in. But at the moment, it's occupied with this layout, which I have a lot of fun. I do a lot of testing. I come out and test most nights, and I can test for several hours to see where the faults are. I run a lot of trains when I'm testing. Okay, so yeah, well, Michael, thank you. I was planning to come later in the year, but as with every other plan in the place, it's all been cancelled. So I'm very disappointed. I was looking forward to having about a week and a half in the Twin Cities researching the MN&S. But yeah, that's not going to happen this year. No worries, John. Thank you. There's my one and only scratch-built freight car going past. Yeah, we were going to have. We've got another member who Rick's just saying we were going to have a meet in St. Louis, and we were. It's, Rick, who's living in Canada now. We've got Graham Knights, who's working at the moment, but he's living in Tulsa, Oklahoma. He was one of the main designers of the layout. He was going to meet up there. But, yeah, it's funny times. Like I say, we were supposed to be exhibiting this layout this weekend, and with everything else, it's been cancelled. Anyway, I better sign off. I don't want to finish, but I better. Thanks, guys. Thanks for watching.
I've got to extend a huge thanks to Graham Stockfeld for taking the time to show the NARC Railroad down there in Australia. If you missed part 1 with Greg Smith, be sure and check that out, as well as Paul Batowski's part 3, Central Minnesota and Western. Be sure and subscribe to this channel if you're looking for future content that's entertaining.
For 3 layout tour, for 3 layout tour.